Each morning, in the bustling metropolis of Ho Chi Minh City, a woman sits atop a real estate empire built through decades of sacrifice, grind, and determination. Her corporation acts as a prominent vein in Vietnam's economy, helping the country to flow with economic prosperity. And she is treated with proportionate respect by her financial equals, who admire her work ethic and resourcefulness. Yet, when her grand office door shuts, she laughs at the foolishness and gullibility of her peers. Because behind this facade of entrepreneurial brilliance and nobility lies something much more sinister. A law-abiding business owner on the surface, she may be. Peek behind the curtain, however, and you will find that she is the puppetmaster of the country's biggest bank, able to control the strings, the very beating heart of Vietnam's economy, to embezzle not just millions, but billions of dollars into her own bank account. This is the story of Chi Young Mi Lan, the woman who single-handedly caused a bank run in one of the world's leading economic powers and made millions of dollars in the process. Now, to gain a true understanding of how Chi Young Mi Lan was able to build an empire like this, we need to take a few steps back, because her story actually begins in a much more humble setting. Born in the late 1950s, Chi Young Mi Lan grew up the daughter of a financially modest family who made their living selling cosmetics in a local market in Ho Chi Minh City. From an early age, Chi Young Mi Lan would support her mother with this business. However, even as a child, her ambitions were much greater than this. It was Lan's dream to own her own real estate company, one that would allow her to realise much greater financial rewards than a simple jewellery stand ever could. And for the next few decades, Lan worked towards her dream, educating herself in the world of real estate, building the right connections, and laying the foundations of her company. All this work finally allowed her to open the doors to her very own real estate company by the name of Van Tin Phat in 1992. Her business focused on acquiring luxury residential buildings, offices, hotels, and even shopping centres, selling them for giant profits. This business was a success virtually the moment it started, and Lan quickly grew a reputation for being a respectable, intelligent, and well-connected entrepreneur. And her commercial success clearly brought with it lucrative personal financial gains and a great deal of influence, the kind that the child growing up selling jewellery on the street corner could only dream of. However, for a woman as ambitious as Lan, even this success didn't satisfy her appetite. She wanted more influence, more money, and more power. And she wasn't afraid to push, bend, or even break the rules to get there. Lan's next big move would come in 2011, when three of Vietnam's largest banks merged to form the Saigon Joint Stock Commercial Bank, which became the country's largest bank in terms of assets. Using her seat of power, Lan, in secret, purchased the best part of 90% of the bank through more than 20 middlemen, a point that we'll come to later. With this majority share, Lan was basically able to control every movement the bank made, completely under the radar. This allowed her to create illicit loan applications to lend herself money through fake shell companies that she owned. These shell companies would apply for huge loans from SCB, often in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars each. And because she secretly owned the bank, the loans were automatically approved either without collateral or backed up by overvalued real estate owned by her own company, Van Tin Phan. Once the loan was issued, the money went straight back into her pocket, either as real estate investments, offshore transfers, or debt payments from other shell firms in her network. She essentially created a loop of fake lending, money circulating between companies that all belonged to her, while SCB's balance sheet looked like it was doing legitimate business. Though illegal in literally every sense of the word, this scheme was also somewhat beautiful. By using so many middlemen, Lan was able to muddy the connection between herself and the loans created by the bank, which allowed the scheme to go on for years unnoticed. Well-placed bribes, sometimes upward of $5 million in value, also helped to keep officials off the bank's back, allowing fraud to take place on a never-before-seen level. In fact, over the next decade, the SCB issued more than 2,500 loans to companies controlled by Lan, either as shell companies or genuine corporations. From this scheme, it's no understatement to say that Lan earned a simply unfathomable amount of money from this enterprise. Not millions, not even billions. I'm talking tens of billions, with some estimates suggesting that the best part of $27 billion was stolen through her fraudulent empire. However, every empire eventually has its day of reckoning, and unbeknownst to her, Lan's day of judgment would come sooner than she ever thought possible. Now, before we explore how the walls around Lan began to crumble in front of her before she even had a chance to react, if you haven't already, please pound that subscribe button. It's completely free and it'll help prevent scammers from robbing you of your entire life savings. So please do yourself a favor, subscribe, or be scammed. The simple fact is that even if you are a criminal genius, and even if you do have the right bribes in the right places, you can't just cover up tens of billions being lost over the course of a decade. And by 2021, SCB's financial statement started looking suspiciously weak, with auditors noticing these huge volumes of loans to paper-thin companies. In layman's terms, the numbers stopped adding up. The bank had too many performing loans that, in reality, were circular debts feeding into each other. This, in turn, created rumours that SCB was facing solvency issues, which led thousands of depositors to withdraw their money. With so many withdrawals, the State Bank of Vietnam, the country's centralised bank, was forced to step in to stabilise SCB's operations. Not exactly the ideal situation if you're running a multi-billion-dollar fraudulent operation. During this temporary takeover to stop the panic, forensic accountants began tracing loan data, and that's where Lan's fingerprints showed up everywhere. At the same time, several mid-level employees allegedly cooperated with investigators, handing over spreadsheets and internal emails. These showed that Lan had illegally controlled over 90% of SCB's shares, using proxies and shell shareholders, a direct violation of Vietnam's banking ownership laws, which cap ownership at 5% per individual. The more they dug, the more evidence they found. Evidence that only pointed one way. The 2,500 odd fake loan applications, the bribery payments, the loans being funneled into shell companies owned by Lan, it was all found. Before they even had a chance to digest it, the authorities found that they were sitting on one of the biggest financial fraud cases in the country's history, and all the evidence pointed to one person, Lan. Thus, on the 8th of October 2022, Lan was arrested on suspicion of financial embezzlement. Normally, this will be part of the video where I tell you that our beloved scammer was smacked with a hefty prison sentence and forced to repay all the money he or she stole from their victims. Now, for Lan, the consequences were much more severe. First of all, she was ordered to pay the equivalent of $27 billion in compensation to the victims that she had stolen from. However, the real blow came when the authorities sentenced her to death. Now, a death sentence for a financial crime was clearly a massive statement, even in a country where capital punishment is permitted, which did prompt a fairly large trial that would ultimately go on for over a year. Lan then received a massive stroke of luck in June 2025, when the law in Vietnam changed, removing the death penalty for embezzlement, effectively making the prosecution's argument null and void. Faced with this pretty unprecedented situation, the court reduced her punishment to life in prison. To our knowledge, Lan is still serving this prison sentence today, where she will remain till the end of her days, which, for a while, were much more numerous. Ultimately, the story of Chi Long My Lan proved to be one of the biggest financial scams in Vietnamese history and would go on to shock the country's economy for years to come. However, compared to the way that Alves dos Reis was able to scam literally an entire country into printing him money for free, her crimes honestly don't seem all that impressive. Check out the video that's popping up on your screen now and I'll show you what I'm talking about.